So this is a 2004 Terminator Cobra made in the mystichrome color, and that is one of 515 coupes in that color. There were 495 convertibles made in this color, so rare enough, but not the rarest ones made. But it's very interesting to see a mystichrome Terminator that has had some body work done to it and a body kit. That is not very common for a car that is so difficult to paint. And this is the only one I've seen that I can remember that had this much stuff done to it, such as the Cobra R rear wing. Say that 10 times fast. And the front bumper, it has a Cobra R style front bumper, a cowl hood, and looking at the car, it looks like the badges are on backwards on the front fenders. So that is a passenger side snake, and a lot of times those get put on backwards when a car has been repainted and the body shop doesn't pay much attention to it, and they just slap one on, and it usually ends up backwards like that. It's kind of funny, but that's kind of a telltale sign that the car has been repainted. So maybe this car had some damage before, and then that's why it received a hood and a body kit and stuff like that. Maybe not. That's just an observation I've noticed. But this car was really interesting to see. Here's that cowl induction hood, so that's aftermarket, and the front bumper had a Cobra R style front bumper. It kind of looks like it's all one piece, so I believe that's an aftermarket, not an original Cobra R front bumper. I could be wrong, but that's what it looks like. And there is some damage to the front splitter area there, and it's kind of drooping and hanging. So I would just take that off anyway and just put a Terminator front bumper back on there. And the back side, there's that Cobra R rear wing. And this would also show that there's been some paint work done or a completely different trunk lid that's been painted on this car, because the trunk lid would have a lot of holes along the back side towards the top of the trunk and on top of the trunk lid on the back side as well, where the holes would go for the provisions for the Terminator rear spoiler. So as you can see, this is an 0304 Terminator Cobra rear deck lid, and you can see where all the holes are. This is the top of the trunk lid. We've been looking at the pictures here of the car, and so you can see how many holes would be there on a 0304 Cobra to fill if you removed that spoiler. And so those would have all had to have been filled and painted over, or the whole trunk lid would have come from another car and been painted. And in the advertisement they say they have replacement OEM Terminator trunks for the car, which is the same trunk lid as any Mustang for this generation. It's just the holes would be there for it. So I assume that they've noticed that it doesn't have a Terminator spoiler and trunk on it anymore. Whether or not those holes have been filled and repainted, I don't know. But that's an observation I've made. It has a normal Mustang third brake light because the Terminator spoiler and third brake light are together as one piece. The third brake light on a Terminator spoiler is integrated into it, and it's a completely different tail light altogether. And you can see some pretty bad damage to the quarter panel of the car. That was enough to total the car out, or at least send it to auction for insurance, and the car was purchased, and it was to be parted out or saved. So I like that the listing in this case said, we'd like to see this one saved. We'd have to get a certain amount of money for this car to be saved, and we'll sell it complete. So I don't know if it was saved or not. Most likely parted out, but it'd be nice to hear if somebody had saved this car and returned it back the way it should be. But the wheels look nice, the chrome Terminator wheels. The back bumper was busted up. I have to get a new one of those. The engine looked really nice, looked like a pulleyed Cobra with bolt-ons. It had a JLT intake on there, and basically other than that it looked pretty stock in there. And here's the engine plaque signed by the two people who built the engine at Ford. So the Terminator Cobras come with built engines. And so that's a really neat thing about these cars, and that's the reason why the value on these have stayed so high. That engine will handle 1,000 horsepower the way it's built. The connecting rods are made by Manley, and back in 03 and 04 when the SVT vehicle team and engineers built this engine and developed it, they had to go with aftermarket connecting rods at the time. So it's a really cool story, and this car has a huge amount of history. So that engine is a very, very good engine, capable of, like I said, 1,000 horsepower the way it sits. A lot of people run them reliably, 600 to 800 horsepower, no problem. And that's just one of the things that Ford had really done awesome back then. This JLT ram air intake, fender well intake, so the cone is actually down in the fender. It gets colder air down there. I've had one of those before on my Mustang Bullet. I've heard that sometimes you have to be careful with those because if you're driving in the rain and you hit a puddle and the wheel well splash guards aren't in there, that cone can suck up water and hydrolock the engine, so I'd be careful about that. But it looks like they even tried to paint it to match with the mystichrome color, although it's probably not real mystichrome paint, but it looks decent. The seats looked pretty good for the mileage, a little bit wrinkly, but these and the 10th anniversary Terminator seats are the only Terminator Cobra seats that had actual leather inserts, complete leather seats instead of the suede or Alcantara. So cool to see. Of course, they're going to be a little bit wrinkly. 51,000 miles on the car, so not extremely low, but decently low mileage. But these are color changing seats like the Mystichrome paint, pretty cool. And yeah, the driver's side has a little more wrinkling in it from being used more, but nice looking set. The interior looks very stock besides that. Shift knobs on there, those are valuable these days. Although this one does look pretty worn out, so that's a little unfortunate, as does the steering wheel, which also has the Mystichrome color shifting leather on it, but you can see it is kind of worn out on the 10-2 grips and a little bit on the bottom. So very nice, valuable steering wheel, but it is a little bit worn out. The car had 51,000 miles on it, so pretty low mileage, not super low, and maybe used a little bit more. There's the back seats, look pretty good for what they are, and the odometer there with 51,800 miles. The shift up arrow, something you noticed there that was only on the Terminator Cobras. So pretty cool to see. Not sure if this car was saved or parted out. Most likely parted out, but it'd be nice to know if anybody knows more information about the car and they can say what happened to it. And there's always the chance that once it's parted out, maybe the shell sold to somebody who repaired it and is putting it back together, because that does happen sometimes with these valuable cars. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Kind of cool to see a Mystichrome Cobra. I don't really like what was done to this car. I think a lot of people would agree with that, with the Cobra R looks on it, but that was more common in the era when the Cobra R was known as the best Cobra ever made. So when these came out and people didn't really know what they are, they tried to turn them into Cobra Rs. And you do have the best of both worlds, where you would have a factory supercharged bulletproof engine that can handle high horsepower, and people who wanted to make their own Cobra R out of it. In that case, you know, that happened often. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more Mustang content.